Billionaire Heiress laughed at a street vendor until she tasted his food and changed his life. On a freezing February morning in Chicago, a single moment of cruelty was about to backfire in the most spectacular way imaginable. A billionaire heiress was about to discover that the homeless man she mocked served food that would put her five-star chefs to shame. This is the story of how one bite would expose the ugly truth about privilege, shatter a wall of arrogance built over decades, and launch the most unlikely success story you've ever heard. From the streets to success, but the journey there would destroy everything she thought she knew about power, worth, and what it truly means to have it all. But what happened next? No one could have predicted. Meet Marcus Thompson, a 52-year-old black man who once owned 3 successful restaurants in Detroit. But when the 2008 financial crisis hit, everything crumbled. His restaurants closed, his marriage ended, and medical bills from his daughter's cancer treatment left him bankrupt and broken. Now, 2 years later, he lives in a makeshift shelter under the Michigan Avenue Bridge, serving food from a shopping cart to anyone with $3 and an empty stomach. But Marcus carries something more valuable than money: recipes passed down from his grandmother, techniques learned in culinary school, and hands that can transform the cheapest ingredients into something magical. His cart isn't just survival, it's his last connection to the man he used to be. 3 blocks away in the penthouse suite of the Drake Hotel, lives Charlotte Ashworth, the 28-year-old heir to a real estate empire worth $2.3 billion. She's never worked a day in her life, never felt hunger, never been told no. Her world is champagne brunches, private jets, and the absolute certainty that money makes her better than everyone else. Today their paths are about to cross in a way that will change both their lives forever. The morning started brutal. Chicago's wind cut through the city like frozen knives, and Marcus's hands were already numb as he fired up his small propane burner. He'd been up since 4 a.m., preparing his signature dish, a soul food fusion that combined his grandmother's cornbread recipe with techniques he'd learned working under James Beard Award winners. By 7 a.m., his regular customers started lining up. Construction workers, nurses getting off night shifts, office workers who discovered that the homeless man's breakfast was better than anything they could afford downtown. Marcus served each person with dignity, remembering names, asking about families. This wasn't just business, it was community. That's when Charlotte Ashworth's Bentley pulled up. Her driver had taken a wrong turn, trying to avoid traffic on her way to a board meeting. As they sat stuck behind a delivery truck, Charlotte noticed the line of people gathered around what looked like a shopping cart. "What are those people doing?" she asked her driver, disgust dripping from every word. "Looks like some homeless guy selling food, Miss Ashworth." Charlotte's laughter was sharp and cruel. "Food? From a shopping cart? On the street?" She pulled out her phone, already composing a social media post. "This is exactly what's wrong with this city. These people have no standards, no class." But curiosity got the better of her. She stepped out of the car, her $1,000 heels clicking against the icy pavement, and approached Marcus's cart. The smell hit her first, something rich, complex, impossible to ignore. Despite herself, her steps slowed. "Excuse me," Charlotte's voice carried the kind of authority that expected immediate attention. "What exactly are you doing here?" Marcus looked up from his work, steam rising from the cart around him like morning fog. "Good morning, miss. I'm serving breakfast. Fresh cornbread pancakes with maple bourbon syrup, house-made sage sausage, and scrambled eggs with sharp cheddar. You interested?" Charlotte's laugh was loud enough to make other customers turn and stare. "Me? Eat from a shopping cart? From someone like..." She gestured at Marcus, at his worn clothes, at everything about him that represented a world she found beneath her. "Do you have any idea who I am?" The line went quiet. Phones came out. Someone started recording. Marcus kept his voice steady, professional. "No ma'am, I don't. But I know good food when I make it, and I know hungry people when I see them." "Hungry?" Charlotte's voice rose an octave. "I eat at Le Bernardin. I have a private chef who trained in Paris. This is..." She paused, searching for the words that would cut deepest. "This is street garbage being served by someone who probably hasn't showered in weeks." The words hung in the frozen air like icicles ready to fall. Marcus felt every eye on him, felt the familiar sting of judgment he'd been carrying for 2 years. But he'd survived worse than this privileged woman's cruelty. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, "good food doesn't care about your zip code. It only cares about the love you put into it." Charlotte's eyes narrowed. This wasn't how people spoke to her. This wasn't how her world worked. But as she turned to leave, something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Marcus had maintained his dignity under her attack. Maybe it was the looks of disgust she was getting from other customers. Or maybe it was something else entirely. What neither of them realized was that this encounter was being live-streamed by a food blogger in the crowd. What no one could have predicted was that Charlotte's moment of cruelty was about to go viral in ways that would expose truths neither of them were prepared to face. As Charlotte stormed back to her car, her phone started buzzing. Notifications. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. The video was everywhere. #Princess vs. Chef was trending on Twitter. The comments were brutal. Imagine being this privileged and this empty inside. That man handled her cruelty with more class than she'll ever have. Someone needs to humble this trust fund baby. Charlotte's face burned as she scrolled through the responses. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to be above consequences, above public judgment. But the internet doesn't care about your bank account when you've shown your true character. Meanwhile, Marcus continued serving his customers, unaware that his quiet dignity in the face of Charlotte's attack had made him an overnight sensation. Orders poured in. Food bloggers started investigating. And someone very important was about to discover who Marcus Thompson really was. Because what no one realized at that moment, not Charlotte, not the crowd, not even Marcus himself, was that the homeless man she'd just humiliated wasn't just another struggling person on the streets. Hidden in his past was a secret that would make Charlotte question everything she thought she knew about success, about worth, about what it truly means to build something from nothing. The pieces were falling into place for the most shocking reversal anyone could imagine. And when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't just change Marcus's life. It would destroy Charlotte's entire worldview and force her to confront the ugly reality of who she'd become. 3 days later, Charlotte's world imploded. The video had been shared over 2 million times. News outlets picked up the story. But it wasn't just about a rich woman being cruel to a homeless man anymore. Investigative journalists had started digging into Marcus Thompson's background. And what they found changed everything. Food and Wine magazine broke the story first. The Homeless Chef, How Financial Crisis Destroyed a Culinary Genius. Marcus Thompson wasn't just any homeless man. He was the Marcus Thompson, former owner of Thompson's Table, once Detroit's most acclaimed soul food restaurant. Winner of 3 James Beard nominations. The man who'd catered events for presidents and celebrities. The chef whose cornbread recipe had been featured in Bon Appetit and whose story of rising from poverty to culinary stardom had inspired thousands. The 2008 crash hadn't just taken his restaurants. Medical bills from his daughter's leukemia treatment she'd survived, thank God, had consumed his savings. Pride had kept him from asking for help. Depression had kept him from reaching out to old colleagues. And slowly, methodically, Marcus Thompson, the acclaimed chef, had disappeared, replaced by Marcus, the invisible homeless man. But his hands remembered everything. His palate remained perfect. And the food he served from that shopping cart was the same caliber that had once earned him standing ovations from food critics nationwide. Charlotte read the article with growing horror. Social media exploded again, but this time the target wasn't just her cruelty, it was her ignorance. She'd mocked a man whose culinary skills surpassed anyone in her orbit. She'd called garbage the food of someone who'd achieved more in his field than she'd ever achieved in hers. The shame was unbearable. But worse than the public humiliation was the private reckoning. If she'd been so wrong about Marcus, what else had she been wrong about? How many other people had she dismissed, ignored, or hurt because they didn't fit her narrow definition of worth? That's when Charlotte did something she'd never done in her privileged life. She got in her car and drove back to Marcus's corner. He was there as always, serving the lunch crowd with the same quiet dignity she'd witnessed 3 days earlier. The line was longer now. The viral video had brought customers from across the city who wanted to taste the famous homeless chef's food. Charlotte waited in line like everyone else. When she finally reached the front, Marcus looked up with recognition but no anger. "What can I get you today?" he asked simply. "Whatever you recommend," Charlotte said quietly. "And an apology." Marcus studied her face for a long moment. "Apology accepted. But taste the food first. Then we'll talk." He prepared what looked like a simple meal, but Charlotte watched in fascination as every ingredient was selected with precision, every technique executed with decades of mastery. This wasn't street food, this was artistry at its purest form. The first bite shattered everything Charlotte thought she knew about food, about class, about what made something valuable. The flavors were extraordinary, complex, nuanced, perfect. Better than her private chef. Better than Lou Bernardine. Better than anything in her world of privilege and pretense. "My God," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "This is incredible." Marcus smiled sadly. It's the same recipe I used to serve to celebrities and food critics. The same techniques I learned in culinary school. The same hands that once ran a $1 million restaurant empire. He gestured at his cart. The only thing that's changed is the address. Charlotte's hands shook as the full weight of her ignorance crashed down upon her. She judged this man by his appearance, his circumstances, his temporary situation. She'd never looked deeper, never considered that his current state might not reflect his true capabilities or his worth as a human being. From streets to success, but whose success? And at what cost to her own humanity? What happened next defied every expectation and shattered every assumption about privilege, redemption, and the true meaning of success. Charlotte Ashworth did something she'd never done in her life. She admitted she was completely, utterly wrong. Not just about Marcus, not just about street food, but about everything. About what made people valuable, about what success actually meant, about the person she'd become in her bubble of inherited privilege. Standing there in downtown Chicago, with tears streaming down her face and the taste of Marcus's masterpiece still on her tongue, Charlotte made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She offered Marcus something no one had offered him in 2 years. A real chance to rebuild. Not charity. Not pity. A partnership. Within 6 months, Charlotte had invested $2 million of her own money to help Marcus open Thompson's Table Chicago, a restaurant that combined his incredible culinary skills with her business connections and resources. But this wasn't a handout or a publicity stunt. It was a genuine collaboration between someone who had business skills and someone who had real talent. The restaurant became an overnight sensation. Food critics called it a triumph of resilience and redemption. Michelin awarded it 2 stars within a year. But more importantly, Marcus hired other people experiencing homelessness, providing not just jobs but pathways back to stability and dignity. Charlotte worked alongside Marcus, learning not just about food but about humility, about seeing people for who they truly are rather than what they appear to be. The woman who had once mocked a homeless chef now spent her days learning from him, serving alongside him, and discovering that real wealth isn't what you inherit, it's what you build with others. "You saved my life," Marcus told Charlotte one evening as they closed the restaurant together. Charlotte shook her head. "No, Marcus. You saved mine. You showed me who I really was and more importantly who I could become. That viral video didn't just expose my cruelty, it exposed my emptiness. You gave me a chance to fill it with something meaningful." Marcus smiled, his hands finally clean after another day of creating miracles from simple ingredients. Sometimes the people we think are beneath us are actually the ones who can lift us highest. Sometimes the person you mock becomes the person who shows you what real success looks like. From the streets to success, but success redefined entirely. Success measured not in inherited wealth but in earned respect. Not in looking down on others but in lifting them up alongside you. Not in maintaining privilege but in using it to create opportunities for those who've been forgotten. Today, Thompson's Table Chicago employs 47 people, many of them formerly homeless. Marcus has published a cookbook that became a New York Times bestseller. And Charlotte has devoted her life to identifying and investing in people whose talents have been overlooked because of their circumstances. But the most remarkable transformation wasn't in business at all. It was in Charlotte herself. The woman who once found homeless people disgusting now volunteers at shelters. The heiress who mocked street food now understands that the most extraordinary gifts often come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. Because in the end, we're all one bad break, one medical crisis, one economic collapse away from needing someone to see our worth when the world has stopped looking. We're all one moment of grace away from discovering that the person we dismissed might be the one who changes our life forever. And sometimes, it takes losing everything to find out what really matters. Sometimes the streets become the classroom where we learn what success actually means. And sometimes, the most profound transformations begin with the simple act of saying, "I was wrong and I'm sorry." What will your moment of reckoning teach you about the person you want to become?